Hello, everybody, and welcome to our third webinar of the week. And today I'm joined by Paul Gerard, and he is going to be talking to you about digital transformation, testing, and automation. And as it's call for submissions deadline week, and today being the deadline to get your submissions in to speak at Eurostar, we've lined up speakers that have had a strong link to Eurostar over the years. We began the week with a webinar with Richard Egren, who's previously done keynotes for Eurostar. He won the Best Paper Award there in 2014. We've had Bob Galen, who was a tutorial speaker last year, and today we've Paul Gerard, who Paul has won the Testing Excellence Award back in 2010. He was a program chair for our Eurostar Conference 2014, which took place in Dublin. That was a great conference there for us. It was the first time we had a conference in Ireland, so we're delighted to do so. And in 2015, he became an honorary member, as he's attended over 20 years of Eurostar conferences. And he joins the elite group there along with Dorothy Graham, Mark Fuster, Graham Freeburn, and Stuart Reid. So if you want to ask Paul any questions about his webinar, you can type the questions into your questions field on your control panel, and at the end of the webinar then we'll go through the questions one by one. And don't forget, you can type them at any point. You don't have to wait till the end of the webinar. So that's enough from me. Now I'll hand you over to today's presenter, Paul. Hi, Paul.
Hey, how are you?
Great.
I'm just okay. So can you see my screen?
I can indeed, yes.
Yep. The survey. Do I need to do anything on the survey, or what do I do? Remind me.
Well, what we're going to do here is Paul's just going to introduce himself, and then we're going to do a quick poll with you guys.
Okay. Sorry, I wasn't paying attention. So firstly, thank you to the Eurostar team for asking me to do a webinar on a Friday afternoon. So I'm sat in my study, and it's chucking it down with rain at the moment. So what better thing to do than to sit through an hour of me? My background is mostly as a techie. I've been writing code since I was knee-high, I suppose. I've been working in software for so long as mostly a developer, but last sort of 20-something years now in the testing field. And kind of that's me. I want to talk about digital because it's the topic of the moment, it seems. All my friends and colleagues in the testing business seem to be working on digital projects right now. So it seems to be the right thing to talk about. Over to you, Dara.
Okay, so just to kick things off and to get a feel for where you guys are in relation to the digital space, we're just going to launch a quick poll here. And we're asking you, are you working on digital projects? And just tick the box that applies to you. Yes, I am. No, not yet, but I will be in the future. Or no, I'm just interested in the topic. And we'll just give that a few minutes now, a few moments just to get the votes in. We've nearly 60% of people have voted so far. So if you haven't voted, please do so. We can see the results here in the background, so we'll share those with you now very shortly.
This is exciting. It's like Eurostar, isn't it? Not Eurostar, the Eurovision, I should say.
The Eurovision, yeah.
The results across Europe, yeah.
Yeah.
Coming in.
Well, we won't ask you to sing for us, Paul, so don't worry. And that might be a good thing for all the rest of you attendees as well. Okay, yeah. I think that's kind of everyone there who's going to take part. We're up to 85%, so we'll give it another 10 seconds. If you haven't ticked the option that applies to you, please do so. Okay, I'm just going to close the poll now, and here are the results. And we said 42% of you had said, yes, I am working on digital projects, and 28% of you said, no, not yet, but I will be in the future, and 29% of you said, no, I'm just interested in the topic. All right.
Okay, so it's kind of an even split, although it's nice to see 42%, the biggest group are actually actively involved in digital. So that kind of sits nicely with my understanding of what's going on in the marketplace. So shall I crack on now?
Great. Okay. Let me just close the poll now and back over to you, Paul.
Okay. Great stuff. Okay, so I should skip over the marketing. That's enough of that. So I want to talk about digital transformations, testing, automation, and the whole kind of landscape of what's going on, I think, in what we might call the digital space, which seems to be, I mean, 2 or 3 years ago, digital was like, well, isn't that what computers are? They're digital, and now digital has taken a new meaning in the business community in particular, and I think the IT community are catching up. So let me just prefix this with a little statement or two about automation. So, automation is the future. I mean, how many times have you heard that? Or from the point of view of a consultant selling automation services or a tool vendor or whatever. I want to explore a little bit more about how we fit automation into this digital future. Now that seems like, hold on, what about the middle bit, which is like, where do testers fit? Well, I think that will come out as part of the story I'm going to try and tell over the next 30, 40 minutes, whatever. So there is a headlong race. There's kind of a craze out there, and businesses are taking on this idea of digital with some alacrity. And I kind of want to explore where this is taking us, where testers fit, and automation is almost on the tip of everyone's tongue. It's like, well, this is how we make progress in DevOps and continuous delivery environments. But it's not as simple as that, as we all well know. So let's just explore what the impact of this kind of headlong rush into digital really is. Now, as a bit of background, I want to reference a survey that was done late last year, and I just want to use that as a kind of a context for some of the statements I'll make a bit later, and some of the things I want to sort of explore. But essentially what I want to do is look at what digital is. I want to talk briefly about how automation is perceived to be the solution, and yet we have this challenge of it's never been an easy thing to implement with great success. And then I want to sort of explore how we think about automation and how our thinking might have to change. I would argue that it definitely does have to change. So I'm going to reference models in the past and maybe models in the future. I want to talk very briefly about an initiative I'm involved in right now, and then kind of close with saying these are the things we need to really make progress on. What are the challenges of tomorrow? So firstly, I was asked, I have an advisory role with a company called Testplant, who some of you may know. They're a test automation tools supplier, software business in effect. They were part sponsors of a survey conducted by PAC or PAC. I think it's Pierre Audouin, I can't say it properly, Pierre Audouin Consultants. I'm not sure if he's French or Canadian. And this was jointly sponsored by Accenture, HP, Testplant, Applause and Worksoft. I'm taking no position on who the suppliers are. I'm just referencing Testplant because they asked me to comment on the survey just before Christmas. So the survey was titled Digital Testing in Europe, Strategies, Challenges and Measuring Success, which is kind of quite a grandiose kind of title. And let me just crack on and just show you some of the pages out of it. You can download it. I'm afraid you have to sort of provide your email address and a few details to get a copy of it. I can't sort of just give it to you, I'm afraid. And there's a link down there at the bottom. But essentially, the survey was of let's skip through it quickly. Senior professionals in Western Europe. You can see the breakdown of industries. Manufacturing was quite prominent by the looks of it, and financial, a bit surprising, were second, but there you go. Most respondents were senior guys, CIOs, director level, certainly senior management level, I think, heads of tests, that kind of thing. Bigger companies, larger organizations with over 500 employees, although is 500 a large company now? I don't know. And the split across countries was Germany, France, UK kind of dominated a little bit, but it's across Europe, you can see that there. And although the survey was conducted in July and August, the results weren't kind of available until somewhat later, towards the end of definitely the end of autumn, beginning of, I think, November. So anyway, okay, so there's there's a statement of the structure and context of the survey itself. but I want to cherry pick some of the slides that are in the deck that is the report, and just look at some of the responses to the questions there. So the first one, do you agree the expansion of its digital presence is your company's #1 IT priority, blah, 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 next 2 years? So straight away, you can see that people who agree or wholeheartedly agree, so I guess they agree, 78%. So, nearly 80% of companies see digital as part of their business strategy, and certainly IT strategy in the next couple of years. Okay, so next one, which of the following best describes your digital testing strategy? So, okay, how prepared are you with respect to testing in your digital efforts? And again, 1 in 5 didn't have anything in place. 35%, about a third, said we will have one in place, which means they don't want to have one in place yet. And then we have one, but not started to implement it. And then 18%, perhaps 1 in 5, were actively engaged in building and delivering digital systems and presumably testing them. So you can see that the degree of preparedness isn't so great given the number of people who are interested and plan to get involved in digital. So, okay, so let's move on. Now, some of the statistics that came out, these percentages and various questions, again, they're kind of subjective and kind of not vague. I don't mean it that way, but you can't read too much into them. But there were some clear messages from the comments behind the scenes of the multiple choice questions, if you like. So some of the interpretations that were given me were based on what other people have said behind the scenes, if you like. But looking at this one, it's what are the main challenges facing your testing organization today? So what's the big deal with testing in your business? Budget pressure, #1. Well, I'm sorry, that's the kind of answer I'm going to strike off the list. Everybody always has budget pressure, and if you ask anyone in any IT department, budget pressure is #1. Okay, so I'm going to discard that. I don't want to talk about that particularly today. I understand, I acknowledge it, whatever. But the second one, need to work closer with business leadership, which is interesting, because this is like the #1 challenge or the #2 challenge for 86% of companies, of IT departments, I guess. And I'm going to focus on that a little bit because I think it's really quite significant, because for years and years and years and years and years, people have been saying that IT needs to get closer to business. And it seems like something has changed, which meant the IT guys now have that as their #1 priority, and they've got to succeed. They've got to make this relationship with business work. So I'm going to take that as possibly the most important outcome of the whole survey and dwell on that for a little while, because I think it helps to tell the story of why digital is significant for IT. Now, one of the goals of the survey, obviously, from the point of view of the sponsors, was to see what penetration of tools and automation have made into the testing communities in digital projects. And so this is probably the one of most interest to the vendors, of course. And on the left is like, that's this year, 2015. What percentage of your business processes are covered by automated testing, and how will this change? So if you like, the current state in 2015, a few months ago, no one's got whatever it means, 100% coverage of their business processes. I recognize business processes is a bit vague, but what the hell. 8% have over 50%, and then so you can see about half of all the respondents are between 10 and 50%, and then less than 10% I would regard as 0. So 40% have little or no automated testing in place. Now, what's interesting to me is people's ambitions, which is, if you look on the right-hand side, what are you going to do next year? There's a shift, if you like, in all the statistics, if you like, going up. So 7% are aiming at, near 100% coverage in their automated efforts. Then the 50 to 80 range becomes 20%, 30 to 50, 23, 10 to 30, 23%. So basically everyone's working harder, and the number of companies having little or no automation or coverage is reduced by 15%. Now, okay, so far so good. I like the idea of people trying harder to get more out of their tools and automation in this respect. So let's pause, and I want to sort of say, hold on, this is all very well, and it all sounds like highfalutin marketing and an effort by tool vendors to get some data they can put on their slides to justify their existence and their marketing budgets, whatever. I want to pause and just look at what digital is, and just to try and frame the conversation a bit more carefully. Right now, digital is the buzz phrase of the moment. As I said, nearly all the consulting types I know in the testing space are working on digital projects. There's something really interesting happening out there. The money is going into these projects. The background to these kind of projects are, it's if you do a search for what is digital, there are dozens of pages and dozens of blogs describing what it is. It's quite a bit of a mess, like many things in IT, I have to say. But SMAC, SMAC, social mobiles, analytics in the cloud are front and center of what's going on here. So it's businesses making use of social media, they're putting on systems, making systems and stuff available on mobile. They're using analytics to gather data on their customer behaviors and making decisions on the basis of those analytics and feeding that back to changing what they're doing with their systems and their marketing position. And of course, the cloud is becoming ever more prominent and taken for granted that these things operate in the cloud nowadays. So one way of looking at this would be this idea of consumerization of IT. So, there was the day when, for example, a bank, its only systems run on mainframes. All those systems were in a bunker somewhere below ground, surrounded by very high fences, barbed wire, machine guns, and so forth. It was completely isolated from the consumers that, in principle, a bank was meant to serve. And what's changed now is that the periphery, the boundary between the customer and the systems that of record and systems of engagement, that boundary now is pushed right out into the hands of customers and consumers. So IT now it's a very different cultural perspective to say that these systems are now in the hands of people. Now you could say, well, wait a minute, the web's been around for 20 years now. Didn't that make it? It's not quite the same. The goal now is to make the customer's use of a mobile device their interaction with a company in a very, very direct way. Now, okay, so one of the the cynics and skeptics among you, and I count myself as one, when you read about digital, you see the language is full of marketing jargon and buzzwords. And if you're interested, there's a little link to marketing buzzwords, and it's not an inaccurate list of things. I mean, it's a little bit tongue-in-cheek. But what's happened is it seems like the marketeers are running the asylum, let's say. So, and I'll talk about that momentarily. You could also say that the organizations that have been slow to adopt Agile, and in principle we're looking at governments and the larger companies that have systems or on the web, but they're kind of only just getting to grips with Agile because they are not Agile businesses culturally and historically. They're now playing catch up, and they're saying, okay, well, digital is our way of becoming Agile software development organizations perhaps, but more importantly, Agile businesses. So digital is like agility in business in some respects. Now, one of the things I want to explore for a moment is this notion of marketing driving digital. Digital does seem to be a marketing initiative in this respect from the point of view of the businesses that are using it and calling themselves digital. So one of the labels I would put on what's happening right now is it's kind of software development at the pace of marketing. Now, none of you can answer right now, here and now, but when I put this slide in front of people today, what I say is, like, have you ever worked for a marketeer as a stakeholder? They are a very different kind of customer than, say, an accountant or a management accountant in financial services. They are very much more dynamic, fly-by-night, experimental, don't understand almost the challenges of doing software. They want it now, and they want it different tomorrow. This is a big difficulty for most IT folk. To work for a marketeer as a stakeholder is a real challenge. But one of the reasons that moving closer to the business seems to be one of the responses to this digital kind of initiative is that with the marketeers in charge, they are absolutely focused on doing business through the systems that you deliver through primarily mobile devices. So to the marketeers and to the sales folk and the business folk, digital is mostly about customer engagement, getting closer to the customers and almost enveloping them with your apps and knowledge and data, and almost dominating their, trying to make them obsessed with your products through your mobile systems. So there's much talk in the digital space about real-time benefits during customer engagement. So a trivial example, but a very common example, is when you buy a flight, the airline tries to sell you, insurance for the holiday. It tries to sell you a car. It'll try and sell you a hotel and probably other things. So we're very used to that. But that kind of pattern of you're buying one thing and all these extra things are offered to you in flight, if you like, in the transaction, that is becoming more and more common. There are some kind of philosophical arguments like social media is a tool, not a platform. I don't want to dwell on that except to say it's not like our business is based on Facebook. It's like Facebook is one tool in your armory within a digital strategy. Needless to say, the apps, if we're thinking of apps, have to be super simple, frictionless, unchallenging, perfect, you could say. And the whole notion of digital, really, it comes down to the three other bullets there: data, data, and more data. It's about capturing data in the journey, the customer journey, using that to understand patterns of behavior, and then using those patterns to look for opportunities to sell more efficiently, open new markets, do all sorts of things. So in some ways, digital is kind of a more aggressive use of IT. It's not about systems of record, which are very important, but they are not of interest to customers. It's all about customer engagement and that relationship and that experience the customer has. So if you like, one explanation for the getting closer to the business kind of goal is if marketing are running things, they're putting much more business-focused IT product owners in place. And these IT product owners are more obsessed about the business than they are about IT. Okay, so this is, agile as it should be, but it's also coming as a shock to agile teams who are having to really turn around and become more business-focused. So, not to dwell on it too long, apps and an app economy, as it's been called by a couple of people, users are quite used to apps changing every day. Now, if an app is a banking application, they don't see that banking application any different from any other app. They would expect it to change regularly. It might be pushing it a bit to suggest banks, ship software on a daily basis, but the pattern is there. People are beginning to think that actually it's the app I'm doing business with, not the company in my country, on some other continent. If you like, it's the app that is the business now, and people are beginning to believe that they take notice of the app with respect to the business they're trying to do. So they don't buy the best banking service, they buy the bank that has the best app. And that goes right across the board for almost every online business, that it's the app that is the core of the business, and the back-end systems, you keep them well away from customers. It's all about the experience and the app. So customers move between apps much more easily than they do with businesses, or they have done with businesses in the past. So perhaps one way of looking at it is businesses are in an apps race, so they're always trying to leapfrog each other with new offers, new features, slicker experiences. And speed of delivery is partly about being proactive, but it's also, for a lot of businesses, they perceive it to be about survival. If their app is no good, they will lose their business. I mean, that is in the minds of some businesses now. So it's kind of important, okay? So we get the idea. Now, in order to respond to the demand at such pace, the usual response is to talk about continuous delivery, DevOps, and these processes. Lots of automation, pervasive automation, and if it can be automated, why isn't it? Why isn't it automated now? There's a big focus on that. So one way of looking at it is if automation is going to provide true agility, let's call it that, the developers and ops people and DevOps can promise continuous delivery. They can say, we have all the tools to do regular, daily, weekly, monthly, we can do regular deliveries. The challenge then is the testers have to fit into those relatively fast and short-term processes and do their job. And we could say, continuous testing, but that doesn't tell you an awful lot. I use the label continuous assurance, but it's dominated by automation. That's the thing. And so it's not testing through the life cycle, it's automation through the shortened life cycle. Now, I am generalizing an awful lot, so let me just pause for a second to say that not every company is taking the automation as the route to rapid delivery. Okay, there are some examples, but I think the reaction of most IT professionals is that we have to go DevOps, we have to go to continuous, we have to use automation in a much more pervasive way. Okay. Now, the challenge we have with automation is that all our experience is that it's easier said than done. So, being asked to react in a much more responsive way using tools is much easier to ask than to deliver. So I want to just look briefly at reasons why we have a bit of a problem here. So again, another survey. This was a very, very informal survey at a conference where people were asked some questions, and it's all based on shows of hands. So don't take this very seriously at all. That's not my purpose here. And let me just crack on with it and just look at some of the issues. People were asked, which tools do you use? How many people use text execution, capture playback? I hate the term, but what the hell? 99% of people said they had test execution automation in place. Defect tracking, 80%, coverage, 5%, performance, 30%, and so on. So it kind of, you see the numbers. But they were then asked how effective automation was. And I think this was focusing mostly on test execution, test running. Have you achieved significant benefits? Less than 1%. With all the technology out there, less than 1% felt they'd achieved significant benefits. Do you have shelfware, cast shelfware? 45%, nearly half of people said they had tools which were on the shelf gathering dust, not used anymore. Did you experience significant problems? 75%. Do you want more tools? 75%. It's a bit sort of inconsistent in this respect. We have little success, we had real problems, but we want more. And there's this kind of holy grail of automation success. Now, I'm kind of misleading you a little bit because this recent survey wasn't recent at all. It was actually from 1997. Dorothy Graham conducted this at Eurostar. I think it was a Eurostar, or it might be a Star Conference, I forget exactly, but nearly 20 years ago now. But the results aren't so surprising now, are they? We might be a little bit better, but the pattern of failure and the history of failure is not new. It's been with us for as long as tools have. Tools are not so easy to implement. So if we revisit this test automation ambition of the people in digital projects, even moving 5, 10, 15% up the kind of the food chain in this kind of picture on the right, that's going to take a pretty significant rethink and effort to make it happen. Will it happen in a year across our industry? It's not very likely, I don't think. So we need to sort of understand what's going on here. There's huge pressure going on, being put onto us to do automation better. So I want to just look at some of the reasons. I mean, I want to focus on one reason because it's more a matter of thinking than it is about technologies. Tools are sensitive instruments. So as an analogy, or maybe even a metaphor, take your pick. Here we have a surveyor with his laser theodolite, and he can measure the movement of ground or buildings to the millimeter at a kilometer distance. So he can measure with extreme accuracy the relative movement of physical objects in space. Now, when you look at this example of the bridge from the 1940s, Galloping Gertie. I don't know if it's represented well on your screen, but it's wobbling around quite significantly. The tool on the left is simply the wrong tool to measure the problem, if you like, on the right. The tools we have are incredibly sensitive, and yet we use them on systems which are relatively unstable. So using technologies in the way a surveyor would in this respect is like the tools won't help. They'll actually cause you more grief than benefit. So that's one of the reasons that we have this challenge with tools, is the tools are what they are. They are very sensitive instruments. Now, by and large, most people are using tools to achieve what I would call anti-regression. So this notion of detecting unwanted change and an insurance that developers can make changes in safety, knowing that the regression test will detect any unwanted side effects. But how do you achieve this? I mean, how do you align what's happening in the software with what's happening in your tests? How do you align the behavior of the software and the measurement, if you like, capability of the tools and the tests that you create? How do you do this? Well, my conclusion some time ago was that you have to have the people writing the software and the people writing the tests using very similar perspectives, that they have to use almost the same model, the same understanding, the same viewpoint, perspective of the requirements themselves. By that I mean, if you like, the software is the cast from a mold, and the testing is the mold. And the two are a perfect fit, fantastic, but when one changes or the other changes, the detection is very, very straightforward. The challenge is we do need to have this collaboration, this early collaboration, in order for the testers and developers to sing from the same song sheet. If you write the software and then apply automated regression tests to that system and try and detect change retrospectively, we get real problems, the Galloping Gertie kind of bridge that doesn't stop moving. On the other hand, if you take a test-driven approach, you write the tests first and the software has to be molded into those tests. We don't solve the problem, we just make it slightly easier to understand what's going on. So the whole notion of behavior-driven, test-driven, these approaches are gaining ground because it is a simpler process, if you like, to understand the requirements through writing tests and challenging thinking with tests or examples, let's say, before you write the software, you hard code it in concrete, and then you have the challenge of regression. So I use this kind of mold and cast analogy increasingly. It seems to work for me. Now, in order to fix what we might call the test automation problem, it's not a technology problem, it's a people problem. That is, the people designing software, constructing tests, you need to have a congruent model, a good and similar understanding of the requirement, if you like, in order for the two things to work together. So the shift left idea, bringing the thinking and understanding of requirements, further to the left, is critical to do this. The idea is to eliminate mistakes in the code, sure, but it's also to improve requirements before you even commit to code and testing. So let's look at a couple of models. So, where can we turn to try and get a better fix on how we resolve these kind of challenges? Well, Brian Marek, who was one of the signatories of the Agile Manifesto, put this kind of model together many years ago, I think around year 2000, something like that. And it's been kind of adopted and enhanced, and probably the best known version is Lisa Crispin, Janet Gregory's version from their book some years ago now. And you're probably all familiar with this, so I won't bore you with it, except make you aware, here it is. If you do a search for the test automation quadrants or agile testing quadrants, or what I put was Brian Marek testing quadrants, just to try and catch everything, there are literally dozens of versions of that image of the four quadrants, and by and large the text remains the same, but every consultant has used this as a calling card almost to sell the idea of automation in the right place in your processes, your test processes. Let's look at the other one. Again, the test automation pyramid, which indicates where your emphasis of testing should be. With manual tests, a relatively small cloud at the top, then GUI, API-based tests, and then unit and component tests performed by developers. With the volume, the vast quantity of testing done through automation at a lower level, units and maybe integration level. With GUI tests being a minority and manual kind of, not much at all. This is a kind of vision, if you like, and people would recognize that and say, oh, that's fine. And lo and behold, when you search for the test automation pyramid, you see hundreds of variations of it. It's endlessly reused, and you could say, what a fantastic model. But I don't get that message from it at all. The message I get is, we haven't had any new ideas for about 8 or 9 or 10 years. And that's the reason that we still struggle. These models are great for what they say, but they don't give you an insight as to how you think, if you like. So my argument is the models have had their day. Are they still useful? Are they still relevant? They have value, but they are not going to solve our automation problem. That's what I want to say to you. My friend Goiko, just as a little sideline, this is a couple of years ago, 2013, he had this lovely blog saying, let's break the agile testing quadrants. And I got really excited. I thought, this is fantastic, But kind of, I think he's just given a variation on the same theme. It's an old joke between consultants. Every consultant has to have a 4-quadrant model, whatever the hell it is. So I'm not criticizing Goiko by no means, but I'm just saying that, look, it's been really hard to come up with something new because we have this obsession with where testing sits rather than what testing is. With respect to automation, it's what we automate that's important, not where we automate it. So we still have some real challenges here. So automation is still a challenge, of course. We've had difficulties in the past. Unless we change our thinking, we're not. I honestly do not believe we're going to get that much better in the future. We have to think outside the box a little bit. There's also a cultural challenge, and I want to go through this fairly quickly because it's kind of less germane to my bigger picture story, which is like, where do we go with tools in this debate? But where do testers fit with DevOps? Because that's kind of, that challenge comes first before you get onto the automation. The challenge, if you're being asked to get involved in DevOps, is the first statement most people working in DevOps make is, you know what, we automate everything we can, and when we can't do it, we try harder. It's an obsession almost. So you could look at how testing fits in this way with automation, and there are kind of 4 ways, 4 dimensions, if you like. There's the tests, the checks that can be automated by developers. Fine, understand what they are. Checks can be automated at the API level, sure, and that's kind of the second layer of the automation pyramid. The third one would be things like compatibility across browsers, operating systems. Clearly, there's an opportunity to automate some of that stuff. And then the fourth one is the stuff that we can only do by hand. It can only be done by humans. Now that number 4 is kind of where, that's the sticking point, in that we don't know what we can let go. We don't know strictly what we have to retain in the heads and the hands of real people. But in order to do this, we have to sort of apply some effort and trust, I would suggest. We have to trust developers to do certain things. We have to let go almost. We almost have to now the challenge would then be, well, we can't trust them because we know they won't respond. We're providing a safety net, so we don't give them an incentive, right? We have to remove the safety net. I think Goiko first pitched that idea. We have to not give an excuse to be sloppy in development and not test as much. You then ask a whole series of questions of what can we do and when, and this is kind of just another variation on the triangle, on the pyramid, if you like. So I don't want to dwell on this. What I want to do is to say that the perspective of testers has to change such that we have to believe that testing can be done throughout the process, the life cycle, if you like, from requirements through to delivery into an environment with tests run by tools. We have to shift left, of course, but we have to think more as pathfinders. We need to be more associated with risk assessment, identification and assessment. We need to consider what can be done with tools and not at the beginning, rather than to wait at the end and test whatever is thrown at us. We're not a gatekeeper of quality. We're not the last defense. We're not the only person who cares in our team. We have to think much more like a visionary, a risk identifier, manager, pathfinder, facilitator, and a coach or a mentor. We have to help people to test better in our teams. So if you think about what digital is about, digital being about customer experience, monitoring, capturing data, analytics, and making decisions, I would argue that the tests in our development process are basically the monitoring of our process. So we monitor the development process through testing. We monitor the systems through real transactions with users in the field. I've suggested for more than a few years now that actually the notion of monitoring and analytics is not just about production, and it's not just about testing. It's the same damn thing. That the whole continuum of monitoring, analytics, decision making is part of testing. It's part of experimentation and production. So I would argue that the processes that monitor DevOps enlarge the scope of testing in the field and in the lab. So the opportunity for testers is much broader than just, will I do the best job I can in my exploratory testing as soon as I can, and then I just say, what the hell, and let the tools do the rest. It's much more significant than that. Now, just to, again, just throw in another idea into the mix is last year I published a paper on what I call new model testing, kind of not controversially as a model, I don't think, but as a new model. I just wanted to get people's attention. So, and it's worked. A lot of people have downloaded a paper which sets out to identify the thinking processes that we go through as testers. In a nutshell, I think there are 10. Reading from left to right, we look at sources of knowledge and we explore those sources of knowledge. We use that information gathered to model, to create our models in the center of the picture. From the models, and a model might be, for example, a flow chart as a trivial example. That flow chart informs our test design on the right. And when we have an idea of what tests we need to cover that model, we apply those tests. We apply them, let's say, by hand with people, or we use tools to apply them. So this helps me to explain and to discuss where people's head is at when they test. Shifting left is about paying much more attention to the ideas on the left, to our sources of knowledge, inquiring, challenging, to repair or improve our sources, our requirements, if you like. Models are important because we share our models with developers. We don't share our thinking, but we share our understanding. And in the context of this picture, a model is the same as our understanding. Our understanding has to be the same as the developers. Our understanding has to be the same. Our model of the system needs to be the same. We then stand a chance of creating automation that might align with the thinking of the developers. If it doesn't, we find those problems on the left, not on the right. That's the point. And the opportunities on the left are many and varied. So if you're interested, read more, download it. I think the slides are going on the Tesla website a bit later. But my argument is it's the thinking on the left that needs to be promoted. It's not necessarily people who do it. We want developers to think more carefully. We want users to think more carefully. And there are some statements that will come out, and I'm not going to dwell on these, but except the two in the red at the bottom. If you apply automation to muddled, loose, incomplete, flaky features, you are doomed. If you aren't, as a tester or a thinker about testing, involved on the left, you aren't in a good position to test with or without tools. Applying is all testing, not just manual, not just automation. All tests are applied in the model. So this idea of shift left, which I'm sure you've heard about, and many of you have taken on, and you're in the thick of it now. Here's my kind of very simplistic view of the process of shift left. Get involved early, and you have no choice. That's the point. You have no choice but to get involved early. It's not a nice thing to have. It's absolutely critical. You have to shift left your thinking. It's a thinking that moves. So your homework for today, if you like, if you want something to think about, are tools just drones that can only execute regression tests? Is that all we should use them for? Couldn't we use tools to find bugs proactively, like, when we're doing some exploratory testing? Why can't I use tools to help me do what I would call, hands-on, if you like, exploratory testing? If I can think of a test, can I automate the application of that test? If you're a developer, developers think in terms of code. They don't consider doing things manually. They think in terms of code for almost everything they do. And I'm not saying we become developers, but we have to take that perspective. If we're in a test automation regime, we have to think like this. We have to regard tools as extensions of our mind, not just robots. We have to not sort of hand them procedures like we hand procedures to testers to go and run tests. We have to be in the zone with them. We have to have robotics, automation, call it what you like, and the analytics and AI is in our heads. That's where the magic happens, not in the technology that we use to implement tests. So don't forget, the automation happens. It's a part of 1/10 of the thinking that we have to pay attention to. It should not be the center of our attention. It should be something we take for granted. So I want to just have a quick plug of something I'm doing now, which is this knowledge base. So I asked a good friend of mine some months ago, last year, what tools do you use? And literally he sent me an email back, and I've transcribed the email. I've literally just cut and pasted it and put it on a slide. So how many tools do you use? He gave me a list. Well, 23. Now, my friend Rob, was a tester. He's now a head of engineering. He runs the development teams as well as the testers nowadays. That's all he could think of. There are probably more, I don't know. It appears now, if you're working in DevOps, if you're working in continuous delivery, if you're working in digital, potentially you are using or you are exposed to 20 to 30 tools. And it's not just a test execution tool. That is one piece of the jigsaw of automation. So last year, I decided I'd had enough of being confused about tools. When people are looking to search for, evaluate, experiment with, implement, deploy tools, it's a much more complicated problem because you need suites of tools. You may have to bring 10 tools in at once. So our understanding of how to bring technologies to bear on the problem we have in testing and development and release automation and the rest, you can't take testing out of context. It has to be part of the overall plan for tools. So the knowledge base is an attempt to put yet another tools listing together, yet another tools directory. But I'm doing it somewhat differently than most people. Rather than just provide a list which looks great for about 3 weeks and then is out of date, I've got things in place to proactively and automatically capture tools information and to tell me when the tools database is less than perfect. Right now, we have 2,336 tools. Now, I was amazed that that was the kind of scale. I mean, a number of these tools are not testing, certainly not. The scope of the knowledge base is DevOps and testing, but also collaboration tools, because they kind of glue a lot of these things together. I've also, because we took some open source software as a search engine to do the to provide the search capability, it was quite easy to do this. I've discovered 300 bloggers in this space, in the DevOps, testing, collaboration, software development space. So it's not a software developers set of blogs. It's in the space of automation in the context of testing and DevOps, if you like. So we've got 16,000 blogs indexed now. So if you're looking for something on the subject of anything in that scope, check it out, because we've almost certainly indexed it, and you'll find a lot more than you would through Google, because we are only looking at stuff in scope. Okay, so enough of that. I just wanted to make you aware that that was only launched yesterday, I should say, so the paint is still very wet. So the challenges for the next few years are these things. We have plenty of tools that can run tests. Test execution tools are not a problem. Our problem is understanding how we can get tools that support modeling and test design to feed tests to these sophisticated execution tools. The second challenge we have is how do we acquire a coherent integrated toolkit with 15 to 30 tools? Most people evolve tools, try them, use them, try them, throw them out, and so on. It's kind of a bit haphazard. That's my goal with the knowledge base is to try and provide something much more useful to people who are looking at suites of tools, not individual point solutions. Next challenge, where does testing fit into DevOps? Now you could say, let's make it all automate and have done with it. Now potentially in some environments that is possible. In most environments, manual testing is inevitable, has to take place. Pretty much it's happening during development. So we have to have a much more collaborative experience with developers in order to make this work. Okay, that's a fact. We need to do that for automation anyway. So shifting left is like, it's the obvious thing to do. And by the way, you have to do it to succeed with tools. And I would argue in a dynamic digital environment. The challenge we have then is that where does manual testing fit? And I understand the argument there's no such thing as manual testing. Testing is in our heads. It's a set of thought processes. That's what I argue myself. But we know what manual testing is. It's the hands-on craft of doing testing as an interaction with systems and software. We haven't figured that out yet. I don't think anyone has really got that pinned down and a criteria for choosing which tests can be automated and which tests cannot. It's not as simplistic as saying only people can make that judgment. That's not the point. It's the mechanism for getting the data out of a system can be mechanized. The challenge of interpretation is always a human problem. We need to be separating the mechanization of our testing from the interpretation. And the mechanization is something that we shouldn't have to do by hand. That's the point. So with all that, and kind of that was a race through far too many slides, I apologize. But I think I'm done, Dara. So thank you very much. And I think questions should be in order.
Thank you very much, Paul, for that. I'm just going to go open my slides again very briefly, and I just have one or two things there to add. We have a webinar coming up next month with Seb Rose, and he'll be talking about 10 things you should know about about behavior-driven development, Cucumber, and SpecFlow. And let me just share a link here. And that link will bring you into our content calendar, our webinar content calendar, so you can register for this webinar as well as our other webinars coming up over the coming months. And today is our deadline for submissions to speak at the Eurostar Conference 2016. So if you haven't already submitted, you really need to get on top of that really quickly. So if you want to find out some more information, go to our website. But we also have a lot of blog posts there with information about how to submit and the different types of talks and our theme. So it's worth checking that out too. And now let's have a look at some of your questions. One question that came through there, Paul, was just asking what is Test Opera?
Right, I'd forgotten about that. Test Opera is my other response to kind of the digital challenge. With a friend of mine in Ireland, we've set up a new venture to offer test automation. I shouldn't say test automation, but automation services in DevOps and test environments. So it's an attempt to put some of the ideas that I've just sort of mentioned into practice. So I'm wishing myself good luck with that. Thank you.
There's a question here as well. They're just asking about what do you think of the new article published this month by Michael Bolton on the context-driven automation?
Well, it's completely coincidental. I think it came out yesterday or the day before. It's a funny old thing, isn't it, that we've kind of come to very similar conclusions. I mean, we have different perspectives on probably life, the world, testing and everything, but I think their position is they kind of obsess about people believing that tools can do everything and can do testing at all, because testing is so much more than the little bit at the end, which is what I would call application of the tests. So They kind of obsess about that somewhat, and I think they're quite right to, don't get me wrong, but I think we need to move on. I think people now understand. I think that argument is one, and if it's not, well, good luck to people. But they come from the point of view of, they put the center of the tester of the universe, they put the tester at the center of the universe, if you like. So they see everything through the eyes of the tester with respect to understanding the intricacies of software and making judgments about good tests, bad tests, and what you should do next. And that is the exploratory kind of ideal. They don't specify in too much detail what is on the left of test execution, checking if you like. It's kind of one big soup of complexity that only people can deal with. Well, I, in my own way, have tried to simplify it by the new model idea, by saying, well, I think there are 10 thought processes. There are probably more. Okay, it's a model. It's not reality. You know, but I suggest there are 10 processes which you could, at any one time, say, I am here, I am there, I am there. And it helps you to understand the flow of thinking from learning on the left about the goal of the system that you're engaged to test, through to creating examples to challenge those requirements, through to using those same examples potentially, and a lot more besides, to test the software. And then there's the activity many people call testing, which is the bashing of keys or the running of tools. So what I've tried to do, we've kind of come to a very similar conclusion, I think, James, Michael and I, but we've come at it from different angles. So there's very little I would disagree with. I could probably split a few hairs, but what the hell. The interesting thing is that they're coming from what you might call an artisan perspective, testers as craftsmen, if you like. I think I've come at it from a business perspective where the business guy sees it in very simple black and white terms, do it now, do it quickly, do it repeatedly, da-da-da, and so on and so forth. Tools seem to be the answer. Now, we know they're not. So I've tried to come at it from that perspective. So I've come to, I think, a similar conclusion, but I've come at it from a different angle. I think both are valid. We'd have our disputes about some things, but I think our conclusions are fairly, congruent. So I'm comfortable with what they put out. Some of it I think is better understood than others, and that's what I would say.
Okay, thank you for that. That question there also came in from Jonathan Wright, and he's kindly added a link to that PDF download too. So I'll just share that with you guys there too. So thanks for that. Another question I have here, Paul, there says, how can analytics shield end users from failures?
How can analytics shield end users from failures? They can't. Analytics can only tell you what is happening. Now there's a piece of marketing, I think, happening out there, which is analytics will make the lives of your users much better, this, that, and the other, and will prevent failures. I think, I didn't mention it, but on one of my slides, I think I said that the goal is to detect failures in systems before your users do, to prevent them from suffering the impact. But I think I also said it's rather an ambitious kind of goal. Analytics can only really help you to step back and take a look at the way you're doing things today and say, is there an opportunity to change? Is there an experiment we could run with a different process or technology or tool or timing or people or whatever it is? And then you can run that experiment again and then see what happens. So analytics is kind of, the analytics is comprised mostly of, if you like, logs of the history, or it's kind of the same thing. I want to say like the here and now, but the here and now is gone every second. So it's still a log of history. So they can't prevent things in the future. So analytics can only give you a better insight as to what's happening in your systems, and potentially with analytics, if you like, with analysis and with some thought, potentially they gave you the opportunity to improve things. So if a bug gets into production, a bug report, and the whole panoply of events that follow a disaster in production, at a very kind of crude level, that's analytics in action. A lot of analytics are, though, much more forcefully looking at patterns of behavior of users, but also patterns of usage of resources in production. So where it can protect users is if you see resources on a computer or a server increasing without limit, eventually that server would fail. So sure, that's where analytics can help you to prevent failure, sure. But it tends to be on the infrastructure side rather than the application side. Having said that, I'm sure there are calculations that could be done about systems in production, like, this is a trivial example, but could be like we're running out of IDs for customers and our customer community is increasing in size all the damn time. Something is running out. So there's that kind of angle. But the thing is that analytics isn't about the data. It's about having the ideas and the seeing opportunities to capture data and to look at ways of modeling that data to make prediction, to understand the history, but also to make prediction and to create interesting experiments, to try theories, if you like. So in that way, analytics can prevent problems in production, but it's through kind of experimentation, I would suggest, that we try something, and if it works, we keep it. If it doesn't work, we throw it away and try again with something else. So analytics is I took the question literally. Does data from analytics, prevent problems? No, it requires human intervention, human intelligence, and analysis with tools for sure. But you've got to be able to ask the right questions and collect the right data to ask, to experiment and to project what might happen in production. So it's an indirect relationship. Maybe that's the way to put it.
Okay, we've gone 5 minutes over here now, so I'm just going to take one last question, Paul, if that's all right.
Yeah, sure.
The question I have here says, when should DevOps not be attempted in an organization?
Oh, good grief. When should DevOps not be attempted? I'm quiet because I'm thinking. I can't. Let me be brave and say I don't see any reason why it shouldn't always be in place. There are barriers to doing it but there are cultural barriers, technology, business, whatever. But if you look at what DevOps actually is, it's about collaboration between the people who write software and the people who manage that software as assets in a production system. Why would you not want these guys talking to each other? Why would you not want these guys not using the best of technologies to make the process of handover more efficient? Why would you not want technology and DevOps to control configurations, to make deployments into tests and production environments more reliable? Why would you not? I can't think of any reason. So to me, DevOps is, some people are looking at DevOps as an end in itself. It's not. It's just the right thing to do. Having said that, it's also being used as a tool and a marketing tool to push people in directions perhaps right now they are finding uncomfortable. But I think in principle, DevOps is a jolly good thing, and it's about time we did it.
All right, that's it for today anyway. We'll have to leave the questions now. I have one question, Paul, and it's completely unrelated to today's talk. Just want your advice as a past program chair. What advice would you give to any of our attendees here today who are thinking about submitting to speak at Eurostar and would like some insights?
Well, I should tell the people out there that I haven't submitted my sessions yet. So as soon as I put the turn the computer off, I'll be cracking on and putting my sessions in. I get them in. Have a try. I mean, for heaven's sakes. I mean, take it seriously. I don't mean just throw any old rubbish at it. But if you've never submitted to a conference, give it a try. And Eurostar is as good a place as any. It's hard to get in, but if you do, you'll not regret it.
That's great. Thank you very much for that, Paul. And thank you to all of our attendees today. A lot of you have been asking, is this webinar recorded? It is. All of our webinars are recorded. So if you go over to the Test Huddle site, I will add this webinar to the site very shortly. I just need to upload the video. And, and there's also a copy of the slides there. And you can also check out our upcoming webinars. So that's it from us. And thank you very much, Paul, for another great webinar. And
Thank you.
okay, take care. Have a great weekend, everybody.